we would not need to flog openly. Now, for a brief spell, about 3 to 4, 5 weeks, the Nigerian army seemed to find its fate. But the challenge is this, is that we're forgetting that we are facing an ideological problem that has infiltrated the country, has infiltrated the army. So there is confirmation coming from the front that the boys notice that some of their colleagues are not even shooting the enemy.
So who are they shooting?
Well, you need to understand, when I was talking about how we end up killing some of our boys by friendly fire, how we...
Friendly fire?
Well, what do they call it?
Yes.
Yes, they call it friendly fire. You know, we who come at this thing from strategic thinking perspective, we can tell you point blank that because we have not done our due diligence, we are losing the plot. And if we keep going this way, things will be beyond redemption if we do not act on time. That's why I agree with what my colleague and friend has just mentioned, that there is a need to re-engineer the way we are facing this thing. Those boys have observed in the front that there is, you look at the court martials that had to go recently. Who is it that's going to say that they don't understand that in the country, in not only the army, but different security forces, is not new? In Plateau State, I remember there was a particular individual whose name I don't need to mention right now, who was sewing army uniforms in his house. His case was well known. Why was he not picked up? He was not picked up because there were people in the security systems who gave instruction that he should not be picked up. And at that time, they were blaming the governor of Plateau State for the chaos that was in his territory, whereas he had no powers to control forces or troops on ground within the state, even though he's theoretically the chief security officer of the state. So we really need to wake up and face this thing for what it is. It's a hydra. It's many-headed. Look, from strategic thinking perspective, the solution to this thing is only 14 to 17% military. All the other things that need to be done, Nigeria has not done.
So what are the other things that you reckon we should be doing?
Well, let me first say to you that, first of all, you will agree with me that the word terrorism does not have any globally accepted definition. You'll find out that the UN definition of terrorism is different from the OIC, for instance, definition of terrorism. If we look at the OIC definition of terrorism, the federal government is illegal. What the federal government is doing is what is illegal. We are signatories to the OIC. If we go and look at something like the Cairo document, 1990, and the so-called human rights advisory that came out of it, it's 25 articles, we're going to discover that actually what Boko Haram is doing is legitimate. So what we don't realize is that on the international circuits, people know these things. We are making our country a laughingstock. We have divided systems. Instead of coming down, put together experts, first of all, define terrorism from the African perspective. So far, even when they sponsor people to go and do courses abroad, one of the reasons why I'm not really...
I'm sorry to interject. We keep saying that terrorism is global.
Yes.
And everyone subscribes to that cliche that it is global. So if it is global, then we cannot talk about Nigerian or African terrorism.
No, believe you me, every nation defines terrorism from its own perspective if it is wise. And I'll tell you why. For instance, I've just given you an example right now. Go and look at the OIC definition of terrorism.
What will be the difference between that and what
the clear terrorism is that if you study the Cairo document,
it's called the point of view of the individual. Let me just add to what Reverend Thompson is saying. For example, the U.S. Department of State has a different definition for terrorism than the FBI.
You see?
Or than the Justice Department. U.S. Department of State sees terrorism as an act against by sub-national or sub-national individuals or organizations and trying to bring states into conflict, while the FBI sees it as a law enforcement issue. The Justice Department, so it's just the point of view of who is looking at it. That's what he's saying. So it's not universal in that sense. Terrorism is an international problem, but how it's construed. For example, we have a definition in Nigeria, but it's wishy-washy. The ATA of 2011 has a definition for terrorism, but it doesn't capture it. It says if you look at your wife in a bad way, it's terrorism. I mean, the ATA is so lousy. ATA gives. Let me just tell you how bad our own statute is. ATA says the maximum penalty for a terrorist act is 10 years. Now, those 3 guys who were arrested for the Suleja bombing and who were tried, the only ones that we've convicted successfully in Nigeria for terrorism, they were tried under the EFCC Act, which allowed life jail for a terrorist act. EFCC Act. Meanwhile, the ATA, that is the Anti-Terrorism Act itself, only says 10 years in prison. So it's ridiculous, you know. So people, they can't even be tried properly. So that I'm just giving you, because the hierarchy, that is the definition, is very important. It gives you the view, how they are looking at it. So ATA was passed by this current assembly. So it just tells you that this assembly, the one we have, is not serious, or is not even interested in the issues of terrorism.
We have to start winding down now. So in closing, the papers tell us today that another meeting is scheduled for next week in Chad. What are your expectations from this meeting or negotiations?
Well, I have said before that I'm not really expecting too much from these meetings. I expect that they will probably spend some money attending the meetings. That is understandable. But in terms of results, I really don't think we are going to see much, because my fundamental problem with the so-called ceasefire negotiation is that the parties that on that side, the BH side, that's really what is of interest here. It's not the federal government. We are honest brokers. The federal side is very honest, very engaged, very interested, very anxious. But the BH is very reluctant. They are not interested. So maybe they are sending us their cooks and their stewards to come and negotiate with us.
Oh dear.
You know, so it's very unfortunate. And we really ought to do, my problem is do due diligence. He used that word just now. We ought to do good due diligence on who we are negotiating with. You know, who is Danladi Ahmadu? You know, I've never seen him. He wasn't in the Shura of Sheikh Mohammed Yusuf. He wasn't in Abubakar Shekau's Shura. So Shura is a consultative assembly. So where the hell did he come out of suddenly to become
but Honor, you yourself said at the beginning of your discourse that they're faceless.
Indeed, thank you. God bless you. So they're even faceless. So but even Sheikh Mohammed Yusuf, before they became faceless, Mohammed Yusuf had a face. I'm saying before July of 2009, he had a face. Mohammed Yusuf, his shura was well known. All his emirs in different places were well known. So there wasn't anything, because they weren't at that time clandestine, and there wasn't a violent struggle. It was after they killed Mohammed Yusuf that Abu Shekau took it into a violent phase.
Okay, now Pastor, what are your expectations from the meeting next week?
Well, unfortunately, when this meeting goes, I believe that the greatest incentive is financial, and we are dealing with the federal government that doesn't know that the ideological wars do not bow to financial corruption. And what is going to happen is that they're going to discover sooner or later that we are dealing with a hydra. One of the basic definitions of modern terrorism that was re-engineered by people like Osama bin Laden is that you cannot kill one person and think you can stop it. It's a cell structure. It's a cell structure. And because there are moles in the Nigerian government, there are sympathizers in the Nigerian government, the people who are going to go and negotiate, some of them are going to be sympathists. Some of them are actually Boko Haram members negotiating on behalf of Nigeria with Boko Haram, even though they have quite Boko Haram cards that they're carrying. They're going to have what we call a Pyrrhic victory of getting some girls released to show that for political gain, knowing that security is going to be an issue in the elections that are coming ahead. There's going to be a Pyrrhic victory of some sorts, if need be. But while they are doing that, more people are going to be kidnapped, more women are going to be subjected to all sorts of terror. As long as we cannot define properly and do due diligence, in fact, we don't even know where do we start from.
Pastor, God forbid it. God forbid
it.
And that's where we shall leave it for today. We have been discussing the fight against Boko Haram with two security experts, Honor Ekhomu, who came late.
I'm sorry.
And Pastor Ladi Thompson. Thank you very much for coming to share your insights with us.
Thank you.
The pleasure's been ours.